buccountysheriffs.com website, and sign up for our mass notification system so that we can push information out to them as needed. In addition to that, it's important for people to be prepared. This is an opportunity for them to get things together so that if the risk level increases and there is a need for us to issue an evacuation order, they'll have the things they need and they'll be able to do that quickly and efficiently. I think it's also important for people to start thinking about or planning where they might go and how they might get there so that we can have avoid some confusion and perhaps make it go even orderly. I'll tell you that was a lot about how heavy that weighed on my mind and how concerned I was for all of the people who were displaced. But despite how chaotic that was, I'm really proud and thankful of the citizens of Butte County, and I know that my counterparts in other counties would probably share this sentiment. We were able to do that pretty quickly and given the gravity of the situation without any major incidents. The next thing I would like to do is really thank our state and other local law enforcement, public safety, fire service providers. When this happened, we received overwhelming support from the state, from jurisdictions from throughout the California, and we're continuing to receive that support. We will be starting this afternoon, taking the lessons that we learned from this last experience and incorporating them into our contingency planning, and that will include also having resources and assets staged and ready in the event that the threat increases and we need to lift that. As part of that, we have, and very, very thankful and very pleased that the governor's office has committed some National Guard troops to us. We have about 150 of them coming into the region. They'll be staying here, and they will be available for us to use in whatever capacity we see fit. And it's part of that ongoing effort to support this situation because, as I said, although we've lifted the immediate evacuation order, this is still an emergency situation, and we've got to pay attention and have the resources on hand to deal with it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Again, Bill Croyle with the Acting Director of the California Department of Water Resources. So I want to start again with expressing our appreciation and the difficulty of the process this community has gone through. So a number of communities reacted based on the information that we provided through the sheriff and his emergency management team. That was an important part of how we minimize the risk to the public. That's why we do our emergency planning, why we have emergency action plans, and that plan was put in place and the community responded. And so, again, the Department of Water Resources, and I thank our state agency and federal agency partners, want to thank and appreciate the effort that the community has gone through, but also we completely understand the difficulty in what that's put this community in. The efforts that we'll be working together with the sheriff and other emergency management partners at the state and federal level will reinforce kind of the activities, the good actions that this community take based on the emergency planning, the communication, and the response to these kinds of situations. As the sheriff indicated, we still are working through a very difficult situation at the dam. The dam structure is safe. We are working on those areas that have been challenged by the loss of a portion of the spillway. The spillway has been stable for a number of days now. It's stable at this 100,000 cubic feet per second that we're releasing now. We want to keep that rate up as we continue to move more water out of the reservoir to be able to absorb some of the wet weather that we're experiencing apparently right at this moment, and then into the future days and weeks. That's an important part of how we manage the reservoirs in general. In this case, it's a little bit more challenging because of the condition of our spillway. I can't believe how much work that our construction crews, our technical specialists, our design engineers, and those other supporting functions, what they've done in the last couple days to move material into the area below the emergency spillway. Okay, so that work is progressing. That work will continue as long as those both the ground and the air condition or the wind allows helicopter work. We're going to stay on that and continue to provide that corrective action and then that preventive measure in place to armor up that particular area. We've taken almost 20 feet of the reservoir water surfaces out of the reservoir, which poses far less risk to all of the infrastructure that we have here. But as I've indicated before, a lot of water is still up within the watershed. And again, we're monitoring and evaluating that on a continuous basis to see how that, when that runoff comes, we understand how much and when that'll come, and then how we manage that at the reservoir. As I was walking in, I was handed our latest model runs here for the next couple small storms. These are fairly small storms, especially compared to what we saw before. And when I say that, those are modeled based on the expected or forecast snow line, which is how much rain or snow we'll get. And so with the high rate of release we have from the reservoir right now, which is 100,000 CFS, we actually won't see or shouldn't see a bump in the reservoir. Okay, so that means even though we have water coming in right now about 20,000 CFS, and we're removing 80 or 100,000 CFS, in other words, that the difference is 80,000 CFS. So we're moving more water out. So if we get additional water in with this reservoir, say another 20,000, based on the forecast that we have, now it's a total of 40. So that means we're still removing more water from the reservoir than we would receive by the storm event coming in here in the next day or so. That allows us to continue to prepare for future wet weather and runoff, where we might see these higher flows, say much higher, even above 100,000, where again that makes the reservoir be able to absorb that and really not pose an additional threat to overtopping or exceeding the ability of the spillway to release that water. I think that's an important part. So again, we're making great progress on the construction. We will continue those activities as it relates to providing that protective measure, as long as again the ground conditions support the truck traffic and the air the wind conditions allow for air operations with the helicopters. Right now we have 96 construction personnel working around the clock. So again, this is a 24/7 operation. We have placing 1,200 tons of material in the spillway per hour. That's a lot of material moving through the area. It's in the area below the emergency spillway. Okay, so that production rate is amazing, and certainly this community has seen an awful lot of trucks, etc., go through, a lot of helicopters flying around, and that's an important part of our proactive contingency plans that we're putting in place to protect the emergency spillway should we need to use it again. Again, as I said, we're going to continue to keep the construction crews in place as long as it's safe to do so. Again, whether it's ground conditions or wind conditions. We'll continue to manage the reservoir releases. Again, as we look at these storms coming in, we're feeling very good about the reservoir conditions. And in fact, along as the weather kind of plays somewhere along the way it's forecasted, we're looking actually at reducing the amount of water that's being discharged through the flood control spillway, or some are calling the main spillway. Okay, so I guess I'm putting out there, don't be surprised if we start backing off of that release. That's an important part, as I've learned in the last couple days. That's an important part as how we manage how that water is coming from the reservoir and flowing through the flood control structure and then out of the down the concrete chute that was damaged. And so again, we're looking at that planned ramp down based on the design criteria for the dam. So the idea there is, of course, we don't want to tear our flood control structure up any more than it already has been torn. And so that's a critical part. So I guess I'm saying don't be surprised if you see the department reducing those releases. Again, we're looking forward based on our forecast, and at some point later in the month we may see a little increase in reservoir operations, but again, we have an amazing amount of storage that we continue to improve on a regular basis. Maybe to back up a little bit, for those that are watching reservoir elevations, I've talked a little bit about this number of our primary target is 850 feet above mean sea level. Right now we're at 878 feet as of about 10 o'clock this morning. Again, we're dropping somewhere around 8 inches an hour. So that's, again, a significant improvement as we move through that process. As I said, we don't anticipate a rise in reservoir elevation here in the coming days, but we continue to monitor the weather and forecast that forward into the future. I think that's all I'll cover.
Got some time for a couple questions?
Yeah. Why would you consider reducing the outflows right now from the dam when the water level is going down?
Well, we would need, there's the way the flood control structure or the main spillway is designed, there's actually a chute that's carved into solid rock that goes out into the reservoir that we can't actually see. And so even though it looks flat out there because of the water surface, under the water, the landform goes across and then takes a very deep dip right in front of the flood control structure. Okay, so in other words, it's channelized. And if we continue to exhaust or remove water from the reservoir at this 100,000 cubic feet per second rate, then that can affect the rock conditions up front of the flood control structure, and we don't want to compromise that at all. So there's a design model that's, when we have the reservoir elevation at certain limits, they put limits on how much you can discharge at a certain time. And so again, we'll be stepping that down based on the reservoir water surface elevation to make sure that we operate within the design criteria for that flood control structure.
About Fox right there, right behind.
10 land with ABC 10. I'm curious, we're watching these large bags of crushed rock being dropped out there, and people at home are wondering, is that the fix? Is that what's going to keep this place safe for the next year, 5 years, 10 years? Or is that more of a short, medium-term solution while you can figure out what to do in the long run?
It's a good question. So the bags that are flying around underneath helicopters, as well as there's some buckets that are flying around, is a combination of materials. The rock is being dropped into these erosion areas and filling up that void, and then the buckets carrying grout or shotcrete will be placed in there and kind of glue everything together. As well as there's pumper trucks up there where they can get to. They're using the pumper trucks to inject that grout or that cement in and around those rocks to armor that up. So that'll be part of both the short-term and the long-term fix. So we're continuing to evaluate that site and improving the conditions on the ground to, if we had to use that in the future, we can mitigate the threat or reduce the threat of erosion of that material.
I think people are looking at that and thinking that water could just wash those away the way it did last
Well-
weekend. Is that?
Well, I mean, that's the amazing with some of the, that's a natural material that we have there, and we're able to look at placing an engineered type structure by a rock base, and then gluing that together within that erosion void spaces to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere.
Over here with AP.
Yeah, can you quantify where you expect the inflow to be in the storm? So if it's reducing at 8 inches an hour now, where you expect that to be at the peak of the storm, and what do you expect the cubic feet percentage inflow to be?
Yeah. So I want to be a little bit cautious about talking about this, right? Because I want to remind people Mother Nature's in the room, right? And so we have a forecast. Forecasts are updated 4 times a day. Okay, so every 6 hours we're updating this and running our models. So when you ask that question, I want to make sure that there's certain error bars. The other day, the storm parked over us for a little longer, and the inflow went up. Over the last couple days, it was warmer, nicer, light winds, and the inflow went down farther. So it goes both ways for us, right? But our models at the moment, based on what was handed to me, we're sitting just about 45,000 CFS coming in. Okay, again, we're releasing 100,000 CFS, so we have a net gain of about 55,000 CFS, and that's why we don't expect to see that bump in the reservoir surface, because we've already made up enough storage space to manage that inflow. And then again, it'll start to drop back off after the storm goes by.
So what was in it? So you can give us a timeline here. When do you think you'll know you'll have your first test with this next round of storms and sort of give an assessment of how well things are holding up, perhaps normally, just what?
What part holding up? This next storm won't pose a threat to the emergency spillway and the work we're doing there, other than slowing us up a little bit, again subject to those wet conditions or the effect on air operations. The storm really doesn't have any impact on the the flood control spillway or the main spillway with this inflow. This hydrology coming into this reservoir really won't have any impact. Any concern we have related to the spillway, the flood control spillway or the main spillway, is really related to its stability. So we're pushing a lot of water for a number of days over the end of that structure, and it's holding up very well. But we are monitoring that spillway as well as all the other little pieces that we have in place to make sure that if anything's starting to change, we're aware of that right away. We're assessing the truck traffic, how they're getting in and out of the facility, the rate and placement of certain kinds of rock and grout. We're monitoring the debris pile at the bottom of the hill, and we're monitoring again the structure, the main spillway or the flood control spillway as it moves down the hill. That information is being monitored by eyes, humans, cameras, and occasionally a drone will fly to get up a little closer information for those areas that is too dangerous for us to put people in. All that information comes back to our monitoring team. It's vetted by our safety team, and is brought up to our incident command to make sure that we're all informed. And if there's a changed condition, then we're informed. And if there's a situation that develops, we have an opportunity to hit the red phone, and so that myself, the sheriff, and our CAL FIRE IC can evaluate that information very quickly and respond appropriately. Right now, I'm really happy with the function of the structures we have in place, the production of the mitigation measures that are being in place. We have additional contingency plans put in place, and we're implementing some of those to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce the threat to the public.
Foxworthy.
With all this material kind of being placed in this area, to piggyback off of this question, how stable is the ground underneath the spillway? Is there a concern that water could seep through underneath?
I think the concern that was identified in the emergency spillway is really related to how the erosion affected that material. And so the armoring of that material will mitigate the threat of that erosion in the future. So as we continue to armor and pretty much glue it together, so to speak, that will help us if we had to use that facility again, that we could use it and minimize that threat.
So, are you monitoring, is the concern now the main spillway? I mean, it's been stable, you said yesterday, for 4 days, 5 days now. How do you monitor it? What does that situation look like? We've been so focused on this emergency spillway the last several days. If you could kind of explain that.
Sure. It's a good question. We're monitoring and concerned with all of this facility, right? There has been a lot of discussion. There's a lot of visual activity related to the mitigation work that's needed to armor up and protect that site. So a lot of trucks, a lot of concrete, a lot of helicopters. It's kind of like a war zone for all the right reasons out there. So that's not the only place that we're concerned about. We're concerned about the flood control spillway and its health and maintaining that structure. We're monitoring the lower portions of that chute. Again, they've been very stable. We're really happy about that. We're also taking other protective measures to make sure that stays that way. We're managing the debris that's moving down the hill as part of the erosion, as part of what's the lower part of the spillway. We're taking protective measures on the powerhouse to make sure that it isn't compromised by the water that's pushing up against that. All of those things need to be monitored, constantly adjusted, and that's why we have a wide variety of contingency measures, some that are being put in place. We have, continuing to improve our communication, putting additional remote cameras up so that we can push that information quicker back to the incident command team so that we can get more people's eyes on the situation. That doesn't mean that things are changing. That means that we're aggressively attacking the environment to make sure we understand everything that's happening or not happening.
Okay, we got one more question and time for one-on-ones, Mike.
Sure. Sheriff, can you address how many incidents you've had of looting and how many arrests have been made?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because we've had no incidents of looting. That was a misreport. Don't have it. Certainly, we have had burglaries. I think the looting came about as a result of a standard burglary, and that was misinterpreted. My understanding is that we've had a number of burglaries. We've had, over the last couple of days, several hundred law enforcement officers in all of the areas where the evacuations took place, patrolling to try to prevent that. My understanding, as of today, we had law enforcement officers, some of my deputies actually catch some people in the act of doing a burglary. My detectives. Burglary is when someone enters a place to steal, but it's typically isolated to one individual. Looting is when you have a bunch of people break into, for example, a business and completely empty it out. We didn't have anything like that. Burglaries, regrettably, happen all the time. Looting is a rare occurrence. So that's the difference right there.
And how many arrests?
I don't have the number of how many arrests. But I do want to take this opportunity to add one additional piece, which I think is critical to this entire operation. Before I came up here today, my staff advised me that we were asked to put out a message on social media that private people should refrain from coming up here and flying their drones over the site. I understand the interest. I understand that people want to use those drones to get pictures and video. The problem is, if they're up there flying those drones, it interferes with our air operations. If you interfere with the air operations, you slow down the progress. That's a threat to public safety. And not only is it a threat to public safety, that is a no-fly zone. So my staff will also be looking, if you're in the area and you're flying drones, we're going to address that, and that may result in arrests that I can report to you later. Okay? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
That concludes today's press briefing. Some of our emergency managers will be able for individual comment. Our target at this point is for another